work in the creative business and people tell you no, or they don't like the work you're doing, or they say your portfolio is not good enough, if that's what's going to let you down and leave the business, then you're not creative. You're only creative if you fight back, if you bite back, okay? So that's probably the most important thing that I've learned about creativity. So my turning point in terms of kind of understanding this was in Copenhagen. So we had a climate summit. So you heard about the climate summits. They go on each year, lots of government people. And back in 2010, we had, I just saw Obama on the screen. We had Obama, we heard all the presidents coming to town. So I was really thinking that now all our government leaders are gonna take care of this environmental mess. So I had a lot of hope to our elected government leaders. The thing that happened was this. Nothing really happened. So that even sparked me even further to saying, brands get to be part of this solution. And I think, so some of this stuff that I'm going to share obviously is going to take a more global perspective. But I do think all of this stuff is something that's even more important for you to grasp and understand to really become better and more creative. So the first question I said then was, okay, but advertising, think about the power that you hold over people's lives. The amount of stories you tell, but what are those stories kind of really influencing people with? Because most of the time, we've really been selling stuff that people don't really need. So that was the question. And to me, if you think about the power of marketing, just to put it into perspective, Procter & Gamble, you know Procter & Gamble? Yes. So their marketing budget is $10.5 billion US. Think about how much money that is. And think about how much good we could do with that money. So as I said, the entry point of my book was this, you know, if we do good, it's good for business. That being said, most people I talk to have one response when I talk about this. Because for most people, when I talk about social responsibility, corporate social responsibility, you know, all these things, we ought to do something about the mess that we got ourselves into. Most people do like this. So they stick their head in the sand and they just ignore it. And they say, that's not how marketing is, that's not how advertising is. Everything that people want is, you know, we just want bigger cars, you know, we want to look up to people, we want to buy more clothes, you know, all this stuff. So people normally say, you know, why is Thomas talking about all this stuff? Why is this at all important? So that's the one approach. Either you can ignore it. The second approach, which I often see as well, because this is all about care. This is all about crafting brands that care. Not brands that just want to sell you whatever, brands that care. But what I most often see is the second approach. This approach here. Doesn't really show a lot of care, does it? And I think that's where most of the time this goes wrong. Most of the time. Have you heard about the whiskey Johnny Walker? Yeah? Some of you have, okay, yeah. You probably haven't heard about the whiskey Jane Walker. So that's exactly what Johnny Walker did, to say we care so much about women. Does that seem very authentic to you? No? And people absolutely hated it. So my message is really not about this. People that have aspirations, yes, there are people that want to buy bigger and better and all that stuff. But what is really happening right now, which I think is an opportunity to be seized, is that for the first time, doing the right thing is becoming the cool thing. It's not cool to be a prick. It's not cool to ignore your society. It's not cool to roll your window down and throw trash out of the window. That's not cool. So you've got brands like G-Star and others, supported by Pharrell Williams, to show there's a different way forward. And for all you creatives, this is an opportunity for you to kind of share that, to shape that mindset. And globally, people want brands to play that role in their lives. Because if you think about it, who's going to save us? Government? Probably not. So brands have an amazing role to play in this. So when you ask people, who are going to solve some of this stuff, about 80% say, yes, we want to buy from companies that are doing a good job, which is probably not that weird, really. We want to buy from people that we feel care about us, that value us as customers. The problem is, though, that when we then ask how many people actually really do believe that companies are doing a good job, do you think how many percentages think that companies are actually really succeeding at this? It's about 6%. So 6% actually believe that companies are doing a good job. So that's pretty much a big challenge, that 80% say they want to buy for companies that do good, but very few trust companies to do good. And your most important thing is actually not to sell things. Your most important thing is to build brands. Brands that people love, brands that people care about. And why this is so important is that each time, and it happens all the time, that when we don't craft brands that care, they lose value. So this is just an example of United Airlines. They pulled out a passenger in not a very nice way, $250,000 US of the value of that company. Think about how much money the messages you're crafting are worth that much money if you do it wrong. Or this incident where Volkswagen lost about half its value. That's billions of US dollars if we don't do it the right way. So now I've shown you the ostrich way. I've shown you the little firefighter not being very caring. So how do you craft brands that actually do this? And this is about doing it the authentic way, about going the whole way. And I think one of the brands that especially last year did that, and you probably have all seen it. Did you all see the Nike campaign? Hands up. The Nike campaign about believing something, even if it means sacrificing everything. This little thing. Did you like that? Yes. Did you think it was authentic? Yeah? They did it on the 30th year of that little swoosh, made by a designer that wasn't paid a lot of money, unfortunately. But celebrating something that I think Nike have actually always stood up for. For me, when I craft brands, and this is an important thing, and sometimes also an important things to either tell yourself in your brand marketing department or in the agency department. A great brand is something that is loved or hated. Why is Trump a great brand? Trump is a great brand because there's a lot of people that hate him and there's a lot of people that love him. And that's important. When they did that campaign, some people in the US got angry, and obviously you've seen people burning their sneakers. But think about that power of advertising, that somebody got so pissed that they went out and burned their sneakers. I should be pretty mad if I should burn my own shoes, right? But that's the power that you hold in your hands. So it used to be that the stories that we were telling, I mean, when I started in the business, there wasn't anything called digital. There was TV, there was radio, there was print. I actually started hating digital in the beginning. It took me a while before I actually learned to love it. So the stories you're telling today about brands, they obviously stand contested. We're all in social media, right? So if you're not agreeing with the company is saying, obviously you challenge it. So when you have a big company like Coca-Cola that say, taste the feeling, you might not see them as purveyors of great taste, but you might actually see them as something as more of a fat factory. So the stories you're telling are only the very tip of the iceberg. Everything underneath that is important today. How does that company behave? Who do they employ? How do they engage in society? All that stuff. So Coca-Cola landed on the front cover of Bloomberg Business Week, which is an esteemed business magazine, saying, would you believe I'm just big boned? Nah. So the interesting thing is, it's a challenge for Coca-Cola. So what are they doing? They are working on low-calorie drinks, Coke Zero. They're working on bringing more water to people. So they're trying to change the business. And the most important shift I've seen, and this is why I think this approach is so important, is that we in advertising, we as brands don't hold any power anymore. This little guy does. People does. The immense amount of content that we upload on a daily basis. It's great that we just had a little conversation about social media earlier, right? Chasing followers and all that stuff. But if you think about it, how much that has changed. Buzz Aldrin, the guy that went up to the moon in the 60s, he took about 5 photos on the moon. I'm sure that any girl or guy in this room that goes to the bathroom probably end up taking about 37 photos before you kind of have that little Instagram-ready smiley photo. So how do you, in this world, get people to talk to you? Because it's not a one-way conversation. Today, it's about talking to people about stuff they care about. And that's why I'm so fascinated about this. Last year, the biggest campaign didn't even come out from our industry. Do you know what the biggest campaign from last year was? The Me Too movement. For women, by women. There wasn't even a set in stone message. Any woman, or for that sake any man that wanted to support this, could do that. And one thing I'm seeing that's really a challenge to the power that we hold as brands is that we can all kind of start movements. We can all communicate. So I don't know if you've seen this little story, if it made it all the way now to Nigeria, but across where I live there's a country called Sweden. And there was this little girl, 13 years old, called Greta, and she was going to school. And she, as I could, when I started my mission, she couldn't believe that our government-elected leaders, that our businesses weren't doing enough about the climate. So what she did, she went on strike. So she'd sat, like there she is, in front of her school, and saying, I'm not going to school before anybody's fixing this. So it says school strike for the climate, which has sparked and inspired. How many of you have seen this? Greta Tunberg, how many of you have heard about her? Some of you have, okay. So she's inspired about 100 million people to follow in her steps, to protest, to do school sit-downs, to do school strikes. And for me that is so important to what I'm talking about, because why I love sustainability and why I love the aspect of good advertising is that it fundamentally deals with what is a good life. It deals with if we feel safe in our community. It deals with how the traffic on the roads in Lagos is. It deals with education. So sustainability is just some weird fancy word that nobody understands. It's really about life. It's really about what makes people happy. So the way you have to craft brands is thinking about how can you talk to people about people talk about, because people don't talk about products. I don't know how many of you talk about products anyway. We talk about issues that we care about. So think about it as a kind of dinner table, or think about it as if you're in the bus or you're out drinking with your friends. What are you talking about? What are the things that you're talking about? And so take those topics. So let me give you an example. So this is an example from India, and like a lot of places in the world, normally it's the women that do all the household work. And Ariel, a P&G brand, Procter & Gamble, wanted to do something about it. They created a campaign called Share the Load, where they encouraged the first year the fathers to actually participate in the household, and afterwards they actually also encouraged the sons to take their fair share. Why is this interesting? It's really not that much about the washing powder per se. The whole conversation is about let's share the load. But if you think about it, I don't know how it is in Nigeria, but in India this was very controversial. Because men don't do that stuff. That's not men's territory. So obviously people talk, and they tweeted, and they Instagram. So it's a conversation. So what I want you to do is take a completely different approach when you're creatives. I mean, I walked up and down these aisles and looked for great work. And the great work for you is not to be found in Lewis's archive or all the advertising journals, because you're not creative if you copy. You have to be original. And the most original stories are those of life. If you think about it, most great stories out there comes from life. Life is so mysterious and crazy that we can't even invent it. So what I want you to do is really look for those insights, things that annoys you, things that you think the brand you're working on can change. So one of my favorite ads, it's an old ad, is this one, and it's written by a guy called David Ogilvy, the guy who founded Ogilvy, and he was lucky to work on a Rolls-Royce account. I don't know why I have so many Rolls-Royces in this presentation, but apparently I do. But anyway, and the copy reads, at 60 miles per hour, the loudest noise in this new Rolls-Royce comes from the electric clock. So you look at that and like, what old school stuff is Thomas showing now? Why is this a great ad? Anybody? Why is this a great ad? It's a great ad because how would he know? He only knows because he sat his ass in the seat of that Rolls-Royce, that lucky guy, and he drove it. And he drove it not once, but twice or 3 times to actually get that insight, to feel that when he was sitting there and it was silent, and was driving silently, the only thing he could hear was the clock. So that is an insight, and the insight is really what creates all the greatest advertising in the world. And you can find that insight. So the greatest advertising in the world is made from that. But those insights you have to find in life. And I often say that hate or love is actually 2 most important skills in creativity. Because if you love something so much, so you want to protect it, or you want to take care of it, or if you hate something so much, so you want it to go, that is a good creative driver. Somebody who might have made that Ariel ad maybe hated that fact that maybe she had to do all that household work. Maybe that was the thing. So for me, one thing is for you to create ads that talk about stuff, that tries to change minds. But what you can do with creativity is amazing these days. You should never kind of just look to these frameworks. I don't know why we have categories and award shows anymore. It doesn't make any sense. Why do we have print categories, film categories? Because it's about creativity. Creativity can take any shape or form. So one thing that I really loved, I've judged the D&AD Impact Awards the last 3 years, and D&AD Impact Award is really about celebrating creativity that makes a real impact, that changes lives. They have a youth competition as well. You should check it out. It's a global competition. It's kind of like Ken Lyons, D&AD Impact. But anyway, so one of the winners was this little project for a soap company. And what they did these chalks that you would use in school normally, and they infused them with soap. So when you were playing in the school or when you were writing on the blackboard, you'd get soap on your hands, and in that way, they would slowly go in and fight cholera and all that other stuff that infests our communities. So very, very simple insight that we wanted to solve, not with a campaign, but with creating soap sticks. I think that's amazing. But that only comes if you have that insight, if you've been to that school, if you know that stuff. So you've got to be curious. Another thing from that year, and this is just to show you all the stuff that you can do. Plastic straws. I don't know, why do we have plastic straws? They end up in the ocean, they suffocate birds and all that stuff. Why do we use plastic straws? Makes no sense. Absolutely no sense. So this was another campaign fighting plastic straws. So creativity shouldn't be complicated. I know one of your excuses will probably be, oh, but in Nigeria we don't have as big budgets and they have in other parts of the world. You know, creativity is free. It doesn't cost anything. It's free. Everybody can do it. Right now, you can write on a piece of paper, you can write a thing that's going to win you a Grand Prix Cannes Lion, if that's the attitude you have. It doesn't cost anything. One of the most simple ideas that won so many awards, so they had to carry it in on a tray. It was like they were carrying away awards like this. Was a piece of work called the Palau Pledge. Have you seen that one? So the idea was, this is an island in the Pacific Ocean, and they get a lot of tourists coming in. But those tourists can't behave, so they ruin the coral reefs, they pollute the beautiful, beautiful island. So they wanted to do something about it. So what they did, which is extremely simple, is when people entered the country, they got a specific stamp in their passport, a sort of pledge, kind of looked like that. And that pledge they had to take with things like, how do we care for the island, how do we promise not to pick indigenous flowers and all that stuff. So remember, you're coming to immigration. I mean, I came into Nigeria. When you come to immigration, you're always a little bit nervous and a little bit shaky. You come there, they stamp your passport with these 5 things that you have to pledge, and then you have to sign it down here. And that kind of created a global footprint. There's so many people who even went to the webpage of Palau and supported that. So why does this approach work? Because it sparks conversations. It's something that we care about. It's not just selling stuff. A lot of these things don't have the product up front. And I know most of the clients will always say, oh, the logo needs to be bigger, you know, the product's going to be more visible. But that's not what's important. You're building brands. You're not selling products, you're building brands. And if we look at the effectiveness of this is a report that's been done each year from the Gun Report, and it looks at the 100 most effective campaigns. And this is just 20 of them. 15 of those have a good advertising approach. And for me, it actually makes absolute sense that a brand that behaves well, that treats us well, that shows care, obviously that's a better brand. And if we look at a company like Unilever, they've actually proven now that their most sustainable brands grow twice as fast. So when you come into a creative director, or when you go into a marketing department, it's not about doing good. That's not how you need to pitch it. You need to pitch this, that we want to create conversations, we want to do something people care about, we want to build long-term prosperous brands. That's what you're going to tell. But this is not just about being good. What I'm seeing right now is really a massive change that's happening. It's about creating things that are brutally better. This is crazy enough as it sounds. This is a pair of sneakers. And you can bury them in the garden, and up grows a little tree because it got a little seed in the sole. So I met the guy, and when I heard about the idea, I thought, that's kind of amazing. But why would I ever bury my shoes in the garden? Makes no sense. Then he did like a little tiny baby shoes. And then I thought, that is kind of cute. You know, your first newborn baby can bury the little shoes, and up comes a little tree. But the innovation that's happening right now is astonishing from companies especially. Do you know Carlsberg, the brewery? Carlsberg beer? Yeah? Okay, so this might sound like a thing, but typically brands don't like to see their packaging lying on the floor in the streets because it looks messy. You don't want your brand to be associated with garbage. So for Carlsberg, they wanted to do something about that. And specifically, they wanted to do something about that little 6-pack ring, if you've seen that on cans. So they came up with a solution that I thought was absolutely genius. And again, it's a really, really simple idea. Instead of a 6-pack ring, they have glued them together. Just a little piece of glue between the cans, and no 6-pack rings. So again, it's up to you to kind of create those sort of aspirations, that people think this is the cool stuff. It's not cool to drive the Rolls Royce and don't give a damn about anybody else. That's not cool. Or take this example. I don't know if anybody got a Nike Flyknit shoe on. I'm not promoting Nike here, but anyway, this is one of their newest shoes. And what a lot of people don't know, because you can't see it, is that it's one of the most innovative things that Nike have ever done. Because it's, and you can kind of see it a little bit, it's kind of knitted like a sock. So it means a lot less material used, and means a lot less labor. Because normally to assemble a pair of shoes, you need to sew 37 pieces together, which is a lot of work. So by doing that, Nike have not only saved a hell of a lot of resources, which means a cheaper shoe, and which means for us runners, a lighter shoe that's nicer to run in. And again, these are ideas that come from some of the brands that we work for, but this might as well be ideas you come up with. because these are the ideas that companies are looking for right now. These are the sexiest ideas out there. Each year in Cannes, I've followed it. Each year there's more and more interest that deal with sustainability, that deals with doing good. This is the stuff you ought to do. So I'll share another example. So this is a company called Interface. They do something so boring as carpets, like this one. But they make the carpets like Adidas done out of fishing nets, out of plastic they find in the oceans. But what's also really genius about it, which is not good about this carpet, is that it's modular. So let's say that this carpet is really worn out here, then you can switch this model with the model behind the couch that's probably not as worn out. Again, simple ideas. So business is not moving from doing less damage to just employing people or saying we want to be good for the community. Interface has been on a very long journey, and it's just to kind of show you how this sustainability space is moving. Their founder, Roy Anderson, in 2014, I think it was, said, I want to go on a mission zero. We want to have zero impact on the environment. Zero. Don't want to waste anything. Don't want to put carbon emissions up there. But last year, they launched something that was even more ambitious. Now they actually want to clean up all the mess that they've done. That sounds pretty mind-blowing, right? So they don't want to improve it. Other companies have done that. IKEA want to plant more trees that they're using. But what Interface have done is they've launched something called the Climate Take Back. And one of the projects that I think is incredible is this little project. Again, it's carpets. It sounds pretty boring. But what they looked at nature. And the thing is, when plants grow, when trees grow, they store carbon. So that's the whole thing about climate change, right? Because when we cut down those trees, that carbon is being emitted. So they looked to that and they said, what if we can kind of copy that natural thing, photosynthesis, with what we do in our factories? So what they've done is that they make a carpet out of carbon emissions. So they suck carbon emissions out of the atmosphere and they can create carpets. So one thing is saying, okay, we believe in companies to create change. And that's a good thing. And this is the first time I've seen this, that today actually young people see themselves as the biggest change agents. That you can actually do it. It's become a lot easier today to kind of start your own business, to do what it is you want to do to pursue your dreams. So one of the interesting things that I found was that there was this Swedish girl called Marie Delacroix, and she wanted, do you know Starbucks? Yes. Starbucks? Good. Do you have it here? No, okay. Anyways, but Starbucks is one of those companies that are often seen as a very kind of purposeful, sustainable company. And Marie Delacroix, this young Swedish girl, she wanted to work in that company because she really believed in the vision of Howard Schultz improving the community one cup of coffee at a time. But she didn't get the job, not because of race, not because of religion, but because her hair was blue. So apparently that was not okay in Starbucks. But she decided instead to create her own little coffee business. It was a very kind of simple one. It was kind of like a coffee bicycle thing. And you looked at it and you're like, what's up with that? But the clever thing is that if you had to start a Starbucks restaurant, you've got to have a very rich dad or very rich mom, because it's normally about $500,000 US. But with this, it was something that everybody could afford. So she kind of created a platform for everybody with a dream to pursue that dream. And she talks about completely different things. She talks about going up against big business. She talks about doing things her own way. And the interesting thing was I had a Skype call with her, and she said, for some people, there's this guy in Lebanon, so he has one of these wheelies, and he does it because he just wants to earn as much money as possible. That's his thing, whatever he wants to. And for somebody else, it might be the love for coffee. So she enables everybody to whatever dream they have to do that. So most of the time we build brands on the thing that I showed you earlier with Nike, about what is it the brand believes in. We're the great guys, we're going to come there and help you out. I think in the future we're moving to a kind of completely different brand, where it's much more about what you want, enabling you to reach what it is you want to do as a customer, which is a completely different approach. So I'll share one example with you. You might have it here, Discovery Vitality. It's a health insurance company. Maybe you have. It was started out in South Africa. But anyway, the whole idea behind that company is that they have a very, very clear mission. Because we waste so much time doing stuff that's not significant. And right now, we're at a horrific tipping point on this planet. This is a book called The Great Acceleration, and it looks at how all these things, from the socioeconomic stuff, how our cities are exploding, how more and more people are coming into this world, to environmental stuff, how our oceans are dying, how we have tons of carbon dioxide. It is a pretty depressing world at this stage. And I think this is where you have a tremendously exciting opportunity to combine creativity with your heart, to do something that actually does good for the community, for the country. And I remember back in 2012 when I wrote the book, I wanted to reach out to one guy, this guy here. Some of you might know him. Anybody? Exactly, yes. Sir Martin Sorrell, he's been knighted. So he used to run the biggest advertising agency group in this world called WPP. So I thought at that stage, I've got to reach out to the guy and I've got to listen in on what do he think about sustainability, about saving the world, about how this is good for business. And I got an email back to him, from him, so that's pretty good. And it said, too much going on, sorry. He's not with WPP anymore, else you probably could have sent him a job application anyways. But so don't take no for an answer. So I wrote him an even longer email. I detailed all the agencies that I spoke to. I showed all the great work that I was showcasing in my book. And I said, what do you think about this? Is this something our ad industry should take seriously? And I got a second response. Sorry, just jammed. And I'm sharing this story because what most likely is going to happen after Creativity Week, and you heard me, you heard lots of other speakers, is that you go back to your school or your job and you forget all the good stuff that you learned and you're not doing anything about it. So I'll urge you to do one thing and one thing only. Think about the one thing from all these days that you're listening in on, and think about how you can change that in your work life tomorrow. Whether it's being more creative, whether it's being more insightful, whatever it is. Because the thing is, when you hold on to one truth, that just because things were this way, just because advertising business was this way, that's what dinosaurs does. And even Martin Sorrell did face quite a different fate that he probably didn't expect. So he's not with WPP anymore either. Probably not for that reason only though. So I think the one thing that I've learned in this industry that I'm incredibly passionate about, as I said, is creativity. And the fact that creativity doesn't come with any excuses. You're the only excuse to making great work. Great work comes with a piece of paper and a pen, and it's really that easy. So if you want to do something great, if you want to put Nigeria on the global landmark in terms of creativity, if you want to make this world better through creativity, begins with a little pen, begins with a little paper, and it maybe begins with you saying, using love or hate and changing things for what you believe in. So I believe that your voice and your work truly matters, and I'm really excited to see more to your work in the future. I'm sure I'm going to see a lot of great work coming from you. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. Please jab your hands together. Thomas Kolster, big round of applause for Thomas. I think he deserves a standing ovation. Come on. He came all the way, just to grace this and talk to us. Thank you. You want to take a bow, Thomas? Oh, yeah. Thank you guys so much.